If you really needed to eat, and you really just wanted to pick a crop that you knew you could count on, how would you figure out what that was? Which crop would it be? Today, I'm gonna help you answer that question. Stick around. I've lived in quite a few different climates over the years. I've lived in Tennessee, zone 6/7. I have lived in lower Alabama, where I am now, in zone 8B. I have lived in north central Florida, zone 8B/9A. I have lived in Polk County, Florida, which is zone 9/10. I have lived in South Florida, which is zone 10/11. Probably a pretty solid 11 because we weren't that far from the beach. It was awesome. But I have also lived in the Caribbean, near the equator. So it was actually just a year-round spring, always between about 74 and 89 degrees with a rainy season and a dry season. So if I was to say to somebody gardening in the United States, let's say he lives in upstate New York, and I said, so-and-so, which crop would you grow to stay fed if things got bad? What would you want growing in your backyard? Chances are, he'd say potatoes. Maybe a little more adventurous, grain corn, or some of those big squashes that you could bust open and eat. And I reckon he'd probably say you'd want a cow or two, maybe a few sheep, some nice woolly sheep. You can make your own clothes, and a few chickens. Somebody else might say a few rabbits. So kind of go, oh, that's interesting. Now, if I were to ask a Rastafarian down in the West Indies, what would you want to have if things were just all falling apart? Breadfruit, yams, manioc, banana, plantain, bloga plantain, right? So there would be some of these different crops and you go, I don't even know what that is, because you can't really grow it where you are. If I ask somebody from India, they might say absolutely pigeon peas. You gotta have pigeon peas, but they wouldn't call it pigeon peas. You wouldn't even know the names of some of the crops. And as you go from location to location to location, you'll find that there are different crops that are used. You're familiar with the Three Sisters garden, probably. Everybody loves the Three Sisters garden. The idea of the Native Americans growing corn with pole beans and pumpkins growing beneath. I've tried that a few different times and it hasn't done great for me. Other people have written and said it's done fantastic for them. But which variety of pumpkin, which variety of bean, which variety of corn? These things that were determined over generations. And if you were just to go, I'm gonna buy a pole bean and a corn and a pumpkin from the Burpee seed rack at Home Depot and plant them, they may or may not interweave the way plants that had been grown and saved for generations would and have been tested and saved for generations. So if you were to live, say, above zone 6, 5, 4, 3, 2, that area, it gets progressively harder to grow something like sweet potatoes, to get enough heat for it to run, particularly if you're growing Central American style sweet potatoes. There are varieties that have been bred to be shorter in shorter seasons. But there are some that I grew even in Florida, and by the time the frost came in North Florida, I only had small roots on them because they were bred for a very long climate. There are varieties of cassava that take like 18 months to make great, big, beautiful, awesome cassava roots. Wouldn't work in North Florida. Definitely would not work in zone 8. Impossible in zone 7, right? So there's this progression. Things change as you go from climate to climate. Now, they also change, heat-wise, but they also change rainfall-wise. Why isn't my pomegranate tree doing well? Pomegranates are supposed to be really easy to grow, and they grow in this climate. There's only a little bit of frost. It should do great. Yes, but the rainfall being, say, 74 inches a year, pomegranate likes that dry, a little bit more arid, Mediterranean climate. These beautiful pomegranates coming from Iraq and Iran, that even though the climate may have some similarities for how cold, or maybe not how hot, but how cold or hot it gets, the amount of aridity makes a difference. So how are you going to figure this out? How are you going to figure out which crop is the crop that will keep you alive? Well, first of all, you want to go for high calories. I've said that a lot of times. Try to get a high calorie crop. If you can keep some small animals, that's really great, because animals can eat the weeds and can eat stuff sometimes that you can't eat, can eat scraps, particularly, you know, chickens and pigs, and you can kind of recycle some stuff through. If you have space for that, it's great to have some animal food, maybe quail, maybe rabbits. We've tried some of these things. Some of them did well for us and some of them didn't. But we also tried a lot of root crops. Some of them did well for us and some of them didn't. In Hawaii, taro and breadfruit. Breadfruit on the tree, taro growing on the ground. Both of them are fantastic and, you know, excellent sources of calories that have been used for many, many, many generations way back into the past. Other climates, as you get further north, you're going to move more towards grains rather than roots. So here's what you do. What did people eat when it was harder to import food to the area? What did the settlers eat? What did the natives eat? What did your ancestors eat in that climate? Historic records are really useful. Buffalo Bird Woman's Garden. I think it was published by the University of Wisconsin 100 years ago. It's the oral records of a woman and some of her family and how they grew food and tobacco and how they stored it and how they processed it. Very useful information. And if you can get varieties that are similar to what they grew, then you're going to have that stability as well. In the South, if you're in an area that grows a lot of sweet potatoes, chances are you could grow a lot of sweet potatoes. And if you can grow way too many sweet potatoes, you could trade them for other things. You can feed some of the extra sweet potatoes to your pigs or to your chickens, or you can trade them for eggs. You can give them away and buy goodwill with everyone. Have some sweet potatoes. That's awesome. You may be marginal on regular potatoes. You might have more issues with them. Some places are great, some places aren't. Your soil may not love them. When we had hard clay, we had to build up and throw lots of straw and stuff on top of the ground to grow potatoes. Once we did that, they did great. But sweet potatoes, same thing, you know, you got to move up. So you got to figure out, what did people traditionally grow? What has been grown commercially in your area? And think of those two things. If there's a commercial reason, somebody will have figured it out, right? Like if this area really grows this particular thing really well, people will find that out through trial and error. If they can't make money at it, they move away and they stop doing it. There was this huge tung oil industry that was in this area. It's gone now. It's all blown away. Hurricanes uprooted it. It just didn't make enough money, and you know, people moved towards petroleum distillates, etc. So you might have something that's like this big boom and then it goes away. It may or may not work for you there. But look and say, what are people making money from? So in my area, we can grow pine trees and popcorn trees and catfish and cotton and some corn, some soybeans and some peanuts. But if you look at what's going on commercially, a lot of it is pastures with cows and some corn and some peanuts and a lot of cotton. So you gotta go, what is in those families? What did people used to grow to eat here? They used to grow more potatoes here and sell them to potato chip manufacturers. So some of these things have happened. Some of these things have done really well, some of them have not. So you can kind of look at the history and go, oh, what does well? What's a traditional Southern food? What is the fare of the Deep South? Black-eyed peas, do great. Collards, do great. Grain corn, does great. And chicken, does great. So you just make all that. And yams. And molasses. Sugarcane, right? So in your area, that's probably not gonna be the case. Almost every time I talk about a plant, I'm like, I love this plant. This is so amazing. If somebody says, I can't grow that here. Well, I know. We live in all kinds of different places. So you have to figure out what works in your backyard. Here's one way you could do that. Other than historically, right? You want to grow different root crops? Go down to your local ethnic market and just get every kind of weird root that you find in the bins, right? So I've gotten boniato and name and malanga and yellow yam and all kinds of different things like that. I don't even know what these things are. I just plant them all. I did this some years ago. Planted them all, see which ones grew. The ones that grew well, you keep growing, you learn more about them. The ones that don't grow well, maybe they weren't supposed to be in your yard. But historic records and experimentation. Don't be afraid to experiment and to try something. If you really want to try something, if you really want to try your hand at growing a little patch of rye so you can make your own rye bread or whiskey, go ahead and do it and try it and test it. So the on-the-ground experimentation in your backyard is really key. So once you've gathered the data from, you know, what does well commercially and what people are traditionally were eating in your area, then experiment in your backyard. But also don't overlook other gardeners. Please make friends with other gardeners. And anytime you see a nice garden, remember where that person is and try to bring him or her a plant or something. Bring them some eggs, bring over whatever, and go say, hi, I have some extra seeds. What are you growing? And then you've made a friend, and you could find out if that person has lived there for a lot longer than you. You can tap into his knowledge and just pull it all out. Oh man, he said to try Amelia tomatoes and Homestead tomatoes. I've never tried those before. I've always been doing Better Boy. Let me try both of those and see how they do. And then you got that extra bit of knowledge, and you can take or leave what you want of it. So a few thoughts. This is how you figure out what you should be trying to live on, right? High calorie, grows well in your area, traditional staple, commercially viable, and what people around you are already growing. And I hope that kind of gives you a quick overview to think about and get your mind on that process of what will fill me up and what will be easy. Easy to grow. And I've found mine, and I hope you find yours. Thanks for joining me. Catch y'all next time. And until then, may your thumbs always be green.
Go ahead.
If you really needed to eat, if you really needed a steady, stable, safe food supply, which crop would you grow? Today I'm going to help you figure that out for where you are and what you're growing and what you're living like and things. Okay, let's try that again.